Join me as I continue going down the Nick Fuentes rabbit hole. The last time I seen Candace Owens get destroyed like this was Joe Rogan back when he destroyed her on climate change. Let's react to some videos.
People are just born smarter.
Yeah, they're very high IQ. I don't know if they're smarter than white people, but they're...
You have to, that's what the results say.
That's what some results say. Depends on what results you're looking at.
Okay. I thought that was kind of the, maybe I'm just reading it in one term, but I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that like Ashkenazis have the highest IQs.
They like to embellish that, and there's different kinds of IQ. I think Chinese people probably have the highest IQ, Chinese or Japanese.
How do you pick and choose what you believe and what you don't believe and then form a basis like, well, I definitely believe that black people are dumb, but I totally don't necessarily believe, I'm obviously being a little bit hyperbolic here, but I totally don't necessarily believe that Ashkenazis are the smartest. Like, how do you...
Well, I said they're probably among the smartest races. As to who's the smartest, it's tough to say. And I think that Jewish people do embellish that for obvious reasons. Now, there are some studies that say that Ashkenazi Jews do have the highest average IQ, and that does exist.
Yeah, but so then for me, the reason why I'm skeptical of it all, to be honest with you, is because I'm skeptical of history full stop, right? So when you're like, well, this is what we did.
What do you mean, all of history? Or
skeptical of history full stop because we're living in a present right now where they're lying about what happened yesterday. And then when I realized, like, when you completely remove something that would obviously inform our perspectives in a different way, as I covered on my show this week, like the Havara agreement between the Zionists and the Nazis, like that's kind of a pretty big thing to not teach people in school that would maybe inform and make us ask some questions when you totally remove like a German genocide and only focus on one genocide or don't focus on speaking about the Bolshevik Revolution.
Yes. I see where she's going. This is what I thought. Actually, I had a debate with a friend of mine about this. He's a big eugenics guy. If the people with the power write the history, then of course they're going to write it in their own favor. They're going to say that they created something. But who knows if they went out and stole a certain technology from somebody else who didn't have the resources that they had. So it's a very entertaining thought, the eugenics thing. I like it, and it's good for conversation. But it doesn't take that into account. Let me see if she could articulate it better than me.
I don't question. I now have a lot of questions about history full stop. And so he who prints the textbook is king. Agreed. And so if you are coming up with a concept like, well, this is an immutable trait, and I know because I read or I learned this at school or this textbook or I read this book, he who prints the textbook is king. And I'm kind of learning that right now in terms of Hollywood Babylon, the relationship that the deep state has had with publishing agencies for a reason. You know this, I know this. You can't even get your book published.
Right.
If you want to get your book published because they're controlling the press, that's kind of been a running theme. Certainly was the reason why the Russian Tsar, they were pamphleteers at that time, but like certainly was the reason that he got overthrown was that they realized the power of the press. And so when people have perspectives like you and they're base it on like historical knowledge, this person invented the wheel, I'm like, I don't really know what's up and what's down, to be honest with you. I don't even believe in the moon landing.
Tartaria.
So, there you go. There's another one. There's something there. That's very funny. That would
Not kidding.
But the point being is that, so the more that I learn, the one thing that I learn is that we know very little. And so I would never make a sweeping conclusion like that confidently. It could be that some groups are more evil. They're willing to do stuff that you wouldn't do. They're willing to take your entire culture, your ideas, and purport that it was theirs. And that's something that we're kind of tackling in my book club right now because we're realizing that the elites very much believed in this sort of
All right, she always starts talking about some crazy stuff. But I think she has a good point here. She's standing her ground against this guy. I didn't know what to say, talking about black people. They didn't know how to they didn't create the wheel. Did he have a spoken language? But yeah, what she's saying makes sense. I think it's a combination of both. I like a little bit of both. Let's see where she goes with this.
We can apply that logic to what's happening in Palestine. Everyone thinks about, okay, it's very clearly what's happening is an ethnic cleansing. Where's all that stuff going? Are we going to in the future go, well, Palestinians just couldn't get ahead because, they're just not that smart. Fundamentally, if you look at the IQ of Palestinian, the reason why they got ahead is because they weren't that smart and the Israelis were just really smart, or no, the Israelis were just evil. And so I am not comfortable with the conclusion that you have arrived at because I just pay attention to what's happening now and what limited research that I've done. I'm like, well, some people are just a little more evil. They'll rewrite the books and 50, maybe 100 years from now, they're going to say,
Yeah, because that's pretty much what he's saying about, he speaks about this with certain groups of people. He says that they just take stuff. What makes him think that his people didn't do that? It's a practice as old as time.
And it was really a matter of people lying, and it was anti-Semitic, and we'll be none the wiser.
Right.
Fair?
I disagree. I just fundamentally disagree. I think that, it's such a one-sided, it's unfortunate, but it's so one-sided, just a chronic lack of development and
oh my God,
persistent underclass status and lack of contributions to mankind. I mean, certainly in the arts and in athletics, but no inventions, no philosophers, no true great masterpieces, anything like that.
Man.
In terms of fine art, really. And then you have the whole planet is like this, I mean, if half of Africa was super developed or halfway developed and the other half wasn't, maybe you'd have an argument, but it's whether they're socialist or capitalist, whether they got colonized or not, whether they got freed from slavery in 1800 or in 1860, or it's the same story everywhere. There's not one written language among them. You talk about he who controls the printing press. They don't have books. They don't have words to put in the books. And I think that, it's a sad fact of the world, but it's something we have to deal with. And to me, that's the only conclusion that satisfies. And don't get me wrong, I get where you're coming from. I'm not, I'll give you an example. My family lived in Chicago for 4 or 5 generations. And my parents and my grandmother, they had a security firm in the city. They taught cops and security guards how to shoot their guns and gave them licenses and things like that.
Pissed.
And almost all their clientele were black. And when I was growing up, this was impressed upon me at an early...
She's pissed because she don't want to hear this shit. Your little I knew some smart black people story. She don't want to hear that.
This conversation is hilarious. I can just imagine this guy as an old fart rambling on, not knowing what to say.
Again, I think that it's not that black people can't be good people. There aren't smart black people, or there aren't, incredible black people. I'm sitting across from one right now, or yay, and everything like that. But on the whole, on average, and there's billions of black people, they do have that lower level of development, and I think that's why they underperform. And they always said, the older generations in Chicago, when my grandmother was growing up in the projects, when my parents were running this business in the 80s and 90s, they said they were the most polite, the most pious, the most considerate. Right. Some of them couldn't read, though. They would come in and not be able to read, but they were less dysfunctional than my family. My grandmother, her mother had mental illness, and she would look outside the window in the projects and see a black family across the way. And they were sitting around the table holding hands saying grace, and it was an intact family. So I completely agree with you. So, obviously, there's a cultural destruction. Obviously, there's a cultural decline. But I think that was constant, even though the older generation was more genteel, I think that, honestly, that came from oppression. That came from a society where they were the minority. There was racism. There was abuse. There was segregation. And I think that made black people meek. And if you look, the out-of-wedlock birth rate started to blow up, not after Great Society in the late 60s, but in the 50s during the Civil Rights era. And I think that was sort of a regression to the mean moment. And, again, I think that it's not that black people can't be good people. There aren't smart black people, or there aren't, incredible black people. I'm sitting across from one right now, or yay, and everything like that. But on the whole, on average, and there's billions of black people, they do have that lower level of development, and I think that's why they underperform. And
yeah, I think it's totally ignorant. We can disagree on that, but I think it would be the same as saying, like, we look at women today who are all a bunch of hoes, and that's kind of just become the thing. Like, this is what women are, and then kind of looking at this moment in time and saying, like, this is just who they are. It's like women, as soon as they come of age, they just want to be on screen shaking their butts because they're all low IQ and they need men to do this or whatever. It's like, no. The culture has been corroding for a very long time, and I don't accept the argument that it's because women are women and that's just who they all are deep down on the inside. I find that I do think that in time you might move away from that.
Okay, I'm open-minded. Yeah,
we'll see.
Wow, he definitely has my curiosity, and after this video, definitely got my interest. So join me as I go down this rabbit hole. Like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Like, subscribe, and share for more videos like this. And I'll see you next time